Rarely in the course of humanity has so small a territory known so little peace. Recent rocket attacks and counterattacks have brought Gaza back onto the political agenda. But what of life on the ground? In a moment, meet Izzeldin Abuelaish, who despite personal catastrophe has dedicated his life to the cause of peace between Israel and Palestine. Photojournalist and NGO worker Ryan Byler offers stories and photos of Gaza following the recent violence, as we pose the question, what does it take to be a peacemaker? This is Context, a look at life beyond the headlines.
Today on Context, we take a different angle on the Middle East, not the politics of Palestine, but its peacemakers. We'll explore the high cost of making peace and meet the remarkable people who work for it. But first, let's get some background.
It's a mere 360 square kilometers with 64 kilometers of coastline. Its population is just over 1.7 million, about half that of Alberta. For some 4 millennia, Gaza has been occupied by everyone from Canaanites to King David, Philistines to Persians, Alexander the Great to the Ottoman Empire. It's seen many Arab dynasties, crusaders, and more recently, the British. Today, the people of Gaza have travel tightly restricted by the Israeli military. 40% of its people are unemployed, 38% live below the poverty line, and a majority depend on some form of outside aid. While the Palestinian Authority holds political control, Israel controls access at sea, in the air, and along borders.
Our first guest grew up in the Jabalia refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. Following medical studies at Harvard, Dr. Izzeldin Abuelaish became the first Palestinian doctor appointed to a post at the Israeli hospital he served. In January, 4 years ago, he experienced a catastrophic family tragedy. And that experience prompted him to write I Shall Not Hate, a remarkable prize-winning book about peace and forgiveness in Palestine. It's an honor to have Dr. Izzeldin Abuelaish here. You have been a peacemaker all your life, and all your life your country has been at war. Tell us what your life was like as a young boy.
As a young boy, as a Palestinian who was born, as you mentioned, in Jabalia refugee camp, deprived of the most vital need. It's a human and the freedom. And I see it till now, still Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and in other parts of the world, you see millions of children, they suffer the same, deprived of their humanity. And the humanity turns its back to the human face of the children in this world, as I was one of them. And my suffering as a Palestinian, I wasn't born with it. It's man-made. And I looked at that. That's the hope. It's man-made. What can I do to challenge this man-made suffering of not accepting it? Because I fully believe everything from God is for good. What is bad is man-made. But what makes the evil flourish is good people to do nothing. We are watching it, and we think we are far from it.
Conflict has flared up again in recent months, and we spoke with a photojournalist on the ground there in Bethlehem who travels regular to Gaza. And I want you to listen in what Ryan Byler has to say from the Mennonite Central Committee about what's going on right now. Take a listen.
I had never seen devastation on that level before. There were whole city blocks that had been leveled, of government buildings, of individual homes, of citrus groves, agricultural areas where there were these massive craters. And I mean, what I had to keep in mind the whole time was, what it must have been like for the people that lived there, that had to endure that level of bombardment. I just can't imagine. I mean, I heard, messages and saw emails and notes on Facebook from friends that were there that were experiencing it, but it's just really, really hard to imagine.
Dr. Abuelaish, how do you assess the current crisis?
It's a human crisis, because as you have seen it in Gaza Strip, 50% of the people in the Gaza Strip are children below the age of 15. 20% are women in their reproductive age between 15 and 45. So it's a human tragedy. It's a crime against the humanity. We heard what has been said, what is happening there, but the question, what can be done to stop it? Words, it's easy. It needs actions. As a medical doctor, I learned when I see a bleeding patient to rush to stop that bleeding. And that's the question to the human face in this world. What can we do to stop the suffering of the Palestinians and others in this world?
I'm going to ask that we play Ryan's response of what he's seeing from peacemakers on the ground. Just
really amazing people who are taking significant risks for the Palestinians, for the Christians and Muslims. You know, to do any kind of activism puts yourself at risk. For people in the Israeli Jewish community, they risk maybe not on the same level in terms of physical safety, but they risk being, you know, outcast from their own community because what they're doing is politically very unpopular.
Dr. Abuelish, tell me about being a peacemaker with that kind of very reality.
Peace is not a word. Peace is a way of life. Peace is not business. Peace is justice and the freedom, where people feel safe about the present and the future, where people are secure. And that's the peace which is missing there. It's not the word, which is empty. That's why you see it. We are talking about peace. How can we have that peace as a word with what is happening there? The people are killed, suffering. In a time, human being is the most holy thing. Peace, when we value human life, when we practice it, when we live that peace.
What's the hope? When we see that this just isn't stopping?
We need to ask why. And who is behind it? When I have a patient, I treat a patient, and the patient is not improving, I have to ask why. Maybe the diagnosis is wrong, the treatment is wrong. And that's what is needed, to point by the finger to the sick point. Who is behind the challenge of achieving peace? Because Palestinians and Israelis, and personally, there is a possibility, there is hope. I will never lose hope as long as the patient is still alive. Maybe it's a difficult situation, but we need to change the course of the treatment and to understand that peace is not going to happen with force or military means. It must be by choice, and peace that is good and just for all. That's the permanent one, which is missing there.
Okay, hang on to that thought, because we're going to be back with you in a moment. But first we want to find out what you at home think. Is peace in the Middle East a realistic expectation in our lifetime? Send us your answer, and we'll post that. And meanwhile, our studio audience is taking a live vote, and we'll have those results in a moment. We're going to ask Dr. Abuelish about the catastrophic loss that led him to write his autobiography, I Shall Not Hate.